Moscow's airspace, usually one of the most tightly controlled in the world, has again become a stop sign for civilian travel. Russian officials say Ukrainian drones were intercepted on approaches to the capital, and flight operations at key airports were temporarily suspended, disrupting schedules and forcing airlines to reroute or delay planes with little warning. This is the new rhythm of the war. Long-range strikes that may not crater a runway, but can still freeze a city's aviation network for hours. When air defenses are active and drones are reported in the area, the fastest safety move is simple. Pause departures, pause arrivals, and clear the sky until controllers and security teams can be sure nothing is crossing final approach. Russian authorities describe it as a broad, overnight wave. On Monday, December 15th, Russia's defense ministry said its air defense units shot down 130 Ukrainian drones overnight, and said 15 of them were headed for Moscow. That claim has not been independently verified, but it aligns with a pattern of frequent drone alerts and intercept reports around the capital. Moscow's mayor, Sergei Sobyanin, said 4 more drones en route to the capital were brought down later that morning, and that emergency services were on scene where debris fell. He did not, in that statement, offer detailed information about damage or casualties. And the air travel impact was immediate. Russia's aviation authority, Rosaviatsia, said Moscow's Domodedovo and Zhukovsky airports were forced to suspend operations alongside a number of other airports in southern Russia. Even short suspensions can cascade into long delays because aircraft rotations, crew duty limits, and gate availability all start sliding out of place. It is not only Moscow feeling the knock-on effect. In southern Russia, the governor of the Rostov region said a power line was damaged as a result of the overnight drone attack. That detail matters because it underlines how these strikes, even when intercepted, can still scatter debris and pressure basic infrastructure. What is still unclear is the full map of targets and the precise outcomes on the ground. Russia often publishes large interception totals, while Ukraine typically avoids confirming operational details in real time. Independent verification is limited in a war zone where both sides tightly control information and where many incident reports first appear through official telegram updates or state-linked channels. Still, the airport disruptions are the part civilians feel first. You do not need a crater to create chaos. A drone warning in controlled airspace can be enough to trigger a halt, because the risk is not just impact. It is also mid-air collision, confusion for pilots on approach, and the possibility of secondary hazards if air defenses fire near flight paths. So why do airports shut so quickly? Because commercial aviation runs on predictability and drones destroy it. Air traffic controllers need clear, verified corridors. If a drone is reported near a glide path or if intercept operations are underway, the safest decision is to reduce variables. Stop the flow, hold aircraft at safe distances, and restart only when the picture stabilizes. That restart is rarely clean. A single suspended window can strand arriving planes on holding patterns, then divert them to alternate airports. It can leave departures stuck at gates, then jam taxiways when operations resume. It can ripple through the network, pushing missed connections, canceled segments, and aircraft out of position for the next city. And it lands on ordinary people in very ordinary ways. Families find their flights moved into the night. Business travelers lose a day. Crews hit legal duty time limits and flights get scrubbed even after the airspace reopens. The incident becomes, for passengers, less about geopolitics and more about a terminal full of uncertainty. For Moscow, that matters politically as well as practically. The Russian government has long worked to keep a sense of normalcy in the capital, even as the war has devastated cities in Ukraine. Repeated aviation disruptions are a reminder, delivered in the most mundane language of departure boards. That distance is no longer a guarantee of calm. This is also a stress test for Russian air defenses. Moscow is among the most protected airspaces in the country, layered with radar, interceptor systems, and electronic warfare. When officials report multiple drones heading toward the city, it suggests either a saturation attempt, a probing effort to locate gaps, or both. For Ukraine, long-range drones have become one of the few tools that can reach deep behind Russian lines without a conventional Air Force strike package. They are cheaper than missiles, easier to assemble at scale, and adaptable. Even when they fail to hit a specific site, they can still force Russia to spend resources on air defense operations and to harden the rear. There is also the message factor. A drone near Moscow is not just a tactical event, it is a psychological one. It says to Russian citizens that the war is not only happening on a distant front. It says to Russian commanders that rear areas must be guarded. And it says to Ukraine supporters that Kiev can still impose costs despite being under heavy attack itself. And those heavy attacks have not stopped. Just days before Christmas, Ukraine reported a major Russian drone and missile assault that hit energy and civilian infrastructure across multiple regions. Ukraine's leadership and its air force described a barrage involving more than 650 drones and 38 missiles, with at least 3 people reported killed, including a young child, and widespread power outages during winter conditions. That context matters because it frames how both sides justify what they do next. Ukraine argues that striking into Russia is part of forcing accountability and limiting Russia's ability to wage war. Russia argues that Ukrainian strikes are terrorism and that its own attacks are military necessity. The truth for civilians on both sides is that the battlefield has expanded into daily life. Ukraine has also openly described targeting Russian energy assets beyond the immediate front. In a separate development, Ukraine said it struck a Russian oil rig in the Caspian Sea and a military patrol ship, an escalation in its campaign against energy infrastructure that Ukraine argues helps fund Russia's war. Reuters noted it could not independently verify the claim. Reuters put those pieces together, and you see the strategic logic. Ukraine seeks to stretch Russian defenses and threaten revenue-generating infrastructure, while Russia seeks to break Ukraine's energy system and weaken public resilience. Drones, because they are relatively cheap and scalable, sit at the center of both plans. Now zoom in again on the airports. The disruption is not accidental from a strategic perspective, even if it is not always the primary target. Civil aviation is a soft underbelly. It depends on trust and radar in clear skies in routine. When that trust is interrupted repeatedly, the economic and psychological cost can exceed the physical damage of any single drone. There is also an international angle. Moscow's major airports are gateways for foreign travel, cargo, and diplomatic movement. Temporary suspensions do not close Russia off from the world, but they add friction, and friction accumulates. Airlines adjust schedules, insurers reassess risk. The system slowly becomes more brittle. In modern aviation, brittleness shows up fast. One plane diverted can create a chain. It occupies a gate at the alternate field, delays other arrivals, forces refueling and crew changes, and arrives late to its next departure, dragging an entire day's rotation. Multiply that by dozens, and the airport becomes a queue of metal and fatigue. This is exactly why drones are such an asymmetric weapon. A defender can shoot them down and still lose time, money, and normalcy. The attacker can fail to hit a specific target and still force a defensive posture. In a prolonged war, those margins matter. And that brings us to the question viewers keep asking. Are these strikes growing, or are they simply being reported more often? The reality is that both can be true. Drone technology has improved, production has expanded, and official channels on both sides have learned that information itself is part of the conflict. When Russia reports an interception, it signals competence and control. When Ukraine hints at reach, it signals capability and endurance. But neither side is incentivized to provide a full, unbiased picture. So the most responsible way to interpret these events is to focus on what can be corroborated. Officials reported drones near Moscow. Officials reported flight suspensions, and the public saw disruptions. Those disruptions did not end with the mid-month wave. On December 24, Moscow's mayor again said air defense units destroyed a drone flying toward the capital. The Reuters report noted there were few additional details about origin or impact, but it reinforced the broader pattern. The threat has become persistent rather than exceptional. Reuters and persistence changes behavior. Airports and airlines build contingencies. Passengers arrive earlier, expecting uncertainty. Authorities issue temporary restrictions more readily because the cost of delay is preferable to the cost of catastrophe. Over time, the system normalizes emergency measures and that in itself is a sign of how the war is reshaping daily life. The timing around the holiday season adds another layer. Calls for pauses in fighting, including appeals connected to Christmas, have circulated again this year. But reporting suggests no meaningful halt has held, and both sides have continued long-range strikes. Pope Leo XIV, according to The Guardian, expressed sadness over the rejection of truce calls as attacks continued. Even when diplomacy is active, the drones keep flying. In fact, many analysts argue that precisely when negotiations are discussed is when each side tries to improve its leverage. Strikes become signals, air defenses become statements, and airports caught under the same sky become collateral arenas of pressure. For Russia, the pressure is also internal. Moscow is not just any city. It is the political center, the economic hub, and the symbol of stability the Kremlin relies on. Every incident that forces airport suspensions is a visible crack in the promise that the capital can be insulated from the war. For Ukraine, the pressure is existential. Its cities have lived with air raids for years. Its energy grid has been hammered repeatedly. Demonstrating the ability to disrupt Russia's rear is, in Kiev's view, a form of deterrence and a way to demand that Russians feel at least a fraction of the instability Ukrainians face. Militarily, there is also a practical aim: forcing Russia to redeploy air defense assets. Systems used to protect refineries, military bases, and the capital are systems that cannot be concentrated on the front in the same way. Even the act of keeping them on alert has costs in maintenance, ammunition, and personnel fatigue. And fatigue is an under-discussed factor. Air defense crews, controllers, emergency responders, airport staff, and airline crews all operate under stress when alerts are frequent. In the long run, the constant cycle of warnings and suspensions becomes its own operational vulnerability, increasing the chance of mistakes and raising the risk of accidents unrelated to direct strikes. It is also worth remembering the geography. Moscow is far from Ukraine's border, and reaching it implies long-range capability, navigation accuracy, and in some cases the ability to evade or overwhelm defenses. That does not automatically mean a drone will reach the city center, but it does mean the battle space is expanding in depth. At the same time, this is not a one-way story. Russia has continued to hit Ukraine with drones and missiles at a scale that Ukraine says is designed to break power generation and distribution. The winter factor intensifies the stakes because outages are not just inconvenience. They affect heating, water systems, hospitals, and basic resilience. So when viewers ask, why airports, why now, the answer is that airports are where modern states meet their own population. They are visible. They are sensitive. They are integrated into everything from commerce to morale. And in a drone age, they are easier to disrupt than to fully shield. There is also the legal and moral dispute that runs under every headline. International law draws lines around civilian objects, but modern wars blur them, especially when civilian infrastructure supports military logistics. Russia and Ukraine each claim the other is violating norms. Each points to the other's strikes on energy and transport as evidence of intent. The reality for a civilian traveler is simpler. When drones are reported nearby, your flight might not take off. When air defense is active, your arrival might divert. Your plans change, not because you are a soldier, but because the sky has become part of the front, and the sky is becoming crowded. Drones now range from small quadcopters near trenches to long-range systems that can fly hundreds of kilometers. Many are built with commercial components, modified for war. That flexibility makes them hard to fully block because defenses built for jets and missiles are not always optimized for small, low-flying, mass-produced aircraft. That mismatch is why both sides invest heavily in electronic warfare, in radar upgrades, and in layered responses. It is also why we keep seeing reports of large interception numbers. Even if a high percentage are stopped, a small percentage getting through can still matter if it hits a substation, a fuel depot, or simply forces repeated shutdowns. Now let's be careful about what is confirmed. In the December 15 incident, what is solid is this. Russian authorities said a large number of drones were shot down. Moscow's mayor reported additional drones intercepted. Rosaviatsia reported suspensions at Domodedovo and Zhukovsky, and regional officials in Rostov reported infrastructure damage. Those are official statements, not independent forensic assessments. In the December 24 incident, Reuters reported that the mayor said a drone flying toward Moscow was destroyed by air defenses, with few additional details provided. Again, that is an official report, not a full public accounting. So what should viewers watch next? First, watch Rosaviatsia updates, because aviation authorities often signal the severity of a threat indirectly through how widely they restrict air traffic. Multiple airports suspending operations at once suggests either a broader wave or a more cautious posture. Second, watch for whether reports shift from interruptions to verified physical damage in the Moscow region. Disruption is one level of impact. Confirmed damage to critical infrastructure near the capital would represent a sharper escalation and would likely trigger stronger official language and potentially new defensive measures. Third, watch the broader strike exchange around energy. If Russia continues large-scale attacks on Ukraine's grid, Ukraine's incentives to strike back at Russian fuel and logistics nodes remain strong. And fuel in winter is not just military. It is economic and political. Fourth, watch diplomacy, but do not assume diplomacy stops drones. Even as talks are floated, military pressure can intensify. Both sides often try to shape negotiations by showing capability and resolve rather than restraint, especially when domestic audiences are watching closely. Finally, watch the technology. If drones keep getting farther and more accurate, airspace disruptions could become more frequent, not less, because the threshold for precautionary shutdowns may drop. And as defenses improve, attackers may lean more on numbers and on mixed tactics designed to complicate interception. For now, the picture is clear in one crucial sense. The war is not contained to trenches and front lines. It is unfolding in air corridors, in power lines, and in the daily routines of civilians, including those trying to travel in and out of Russia's capital. Moscow's airports are operating, but under a new kind of pressure, where an alert can paralyze movement as effectively as a physical strike. And Ukraine's drone campaign, whatever its exact results on any single night, is showing that reach and disruption have become weapons in their own right. As this develops, the most important thing to remember is the difference between claims and confirmed outcomes. Officials on all sides have reasons to emphasize certain details and omit others. But when flights are suspended and terminals back up, the disruption is real and it is measurable. We will likely continue to see this pattern: drone alerts, intercept claims, temporary airport closures, and an information battle over what it all means. The strategic contest is not only about territory, it is about endurance, perception, and the ability to impose costs at a distance. And in the drone era, distance is shrinking. The front line may be far from Moscow, but the consequences are now close enough to reach the departure board, close enough to change a schedule, and close enough to remind a capital that modern war does not stay in one place.